Welcome to Wake Up with Giants Radio. I'm Nick Smith, joined in the studio today by Ryan the Lion Morris, Cola de RPG, Nicole Castillo, and a special guest, Terri Britt. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about how to claim your crown and own your worth. And so we're excited to jump into this. In fact, we can actually jump in right now and just get going if that works. Terri, do you want to kind of lead us in?
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, I am so excited to be here. And I love what you guys are doing. I love the message that you're bringing. And so I feel honored to be here. When we talk about worth, okay, I don't know about you guys. I will say something to someone, have you owned your worth? They're like, oh yeah, I've owned my worth. I've owned my worth, because we think that, right? We tend to think, yes, I deserve abundance. I deserve to be loved and nurtured and supported. But then when you look at that person's life and you say, well, how's it going in your relationships? And that person might say, well, it's good. I feel like there's something missing, or maybe I could be heard a little bit more. Well, those are signs. Those are signs that you really haven't owned your worth, because when you own your worth, when you claim your crown, you feel as if you matter. You are being treated as if you matter, and you feel nurtured. For me, I'm an intuitive. And so for me, when I'm really in a state of worthiness, I am so open and receptive that I get guidance. And I love that, because it makes my life easier. Can y'all relate to that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, except I think I have more of a tiara some days.
I was going to say diva.
Yeah, diva. Yeah. I need a Snickers. That's what I need. My spirit guides are like, holy shit, dude, get this guy a Snickers bar. You might have to beep that out. But
oh, there's way worse.
Yeah.
Right? There's way worse. Well, for me, the Claim Your Crown came because when I won Miss USA back in 1982, almost 40 years ago, in that moment of winning, now, of course, there's elation, right? There's all this like, yeah, I did it. And then the next moment, there was this sense of, is this it? And then the next moment, and if you could see my videos, you can go back to YouTube and, after the show and do Terri Utley, Miss USA 1982 winning moment. Bob Barker calls out my name, and I go through those emotions. And then I look into the audience as he's still talking to me, where I know my boyfriend is sitting. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've just ruined his life. So in my mind, I was so dysfunctional that I believed being loving and being in a relationship meant you had to completely deny yourself, and that I was responsible for his happiness. And it was so profound that night that I actually went back to my hotel room and talked about giving the crown back. Okay. So I won the crown, but I had not owned or claimed it. I hadn't claimed it. And it really took, can you think about that? I mean, how many times have you had something in your life where you couldn't really receive it? And that's a state of unworthiness. Anybody felt that way?
I have, and I'll lean over on these guys too, Ryan and Nicole. But I had a thought there along the lines of being the person in the audience too, the boyfriend, even though he may or may not have been thinking that, is putting your worth on somebody else. Like, you have to have somebody else to fill your worth. Whereas you're thinking that you ruined his life by finding your worth. I don't know. Ryan and Nicole, what do you think?
Nicole, you're up.
I can totally relate, just because for a long time I was the same way. I didn't feel like I had any worth if I wasn't in a relationship with someone, or afraid to shine my light. I had a lot of opportunities that I did not take because I was afraid, right? I was so afraid of the impact it would have on my partner. I had, people wanted me to model or anchor, or, a lot of opportunities that I had that I was like, I can't do this because my husband would never he would never support me in this, or I don't know. I just felt like it would ruin our relationship if I was bigger.
Is this the previous husband?
No, this is the husband that I'm with now.
And he's good with you now, so you shifted?
Yeah, no, and it was always me. It wasn't him, if that makes any sense. So
Yes.
I was just like, I was training for a bikini competition too. And it was one of those things that I was like, is he going to support me in this, or is he not going to support me in this? And that is a huge strain on a relationship. Like if you don't have a good relationship, competing in a bikini competition, it puts a strain on your relationship if you're not in a good space.
Ryan, weren't you doing that too?
Yeah, when I was competing in my bikini competition, it was tough because I was just so worried about others and the judgments and fears.
The only contestant with a beard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I won.
I know, but I didn't end up competing. This was like maybe 4 years ago, and I was in the same space of, I don't know. I hadn't worked through this yet. So this shift has been very recent, within the last maybe year or two, and we've been married 13 years.
Wow. Well, thank you for being so real and vulnerable on that. For me, where I learned it, and I don't know if this is your situation, is I watch my parents do this.
Mm-hmm.
I watch my parents suppress themselves. There's a cultural belief that when you have kids, you put the kids first. Okay. And people say, no, you put your spouse first. But no, they put their kids first. Okay. So they put their kids first, then they put their spouse, then they may come on the back burner. It's, there may be some time and space for you. And I watched my parents do that. Now, my dad, he at least looked like he was having more fun because he was out building a business and having a good time. But mama really, really gave up everything to be a stay-at-home mom. I mean, she was doing what she felt was the loving thing to do. And so I learned very early on that it is not okay to receive love.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And unless you work really hard, unless you perform and you get it from someone else, which goes right in alignment with what you guys are talking about, having that relationship, right? It's like, I am not worthy of receiving it until you tell me I'm worthy of receiving it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did the same thing, and it got me on a hamster wheel. It made me just want to push. But when you look at it, you realize how dysfunctional our culture is. I mean, it is all about performing for your family, performing for your coworkers, your bosses, for your teachers. It's all about perform. And it sets us up for stress and struggle. I mean, look at you. You said, Nicole, that you've been dealing with this and you're still trying to work through it.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, what I would encourage you to do is, I always look at my little inner child. She's like the voice of me, of the woundedness, and the little kid who says, "Oh, let's go do this. It's really, really fun." Right. And so I would be looking at her and saying,
That's my adult child.
That's, yeah. Yeah, me too. I'd be saying to her, or asking her, like, what's hurting? What's going on? What does this bring up for you? And so I always let whatever the outer world is showing me about myself to take me deep, deep, deep. I go into meditation and I'll visualize that little girl, or I'll journal about it. And I'll ask her, what's the furthest memory you have that you felt the same way? So I'll go all the way back. I call it the retrieving the gift of love process. And so I go all the way back to that moment, and I let and I may not even know what it is other than just following the feelings. So I'll go back and go back and go back until the point I get maybe at 2 years old, which I always say I don't have much memory of my childhood, but through meditation, it shows up.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it'll bubble up, and I'll say, well, what's the belief you took on? What is the belief that is causing you to suffer? Because if you're suffering, it's not the truth. So when I get to that belief, I take back my power. I take back and be the authority of my life and stop the performance and say, okay, I'm the boss now. We're not doing this anymore.
Terri, let me ask you, do you go through that cycle multiple times? So recently, I feel like I've gone through the phase of a 13 or 14-year-old, where I was in my life at that point. Some of the stuff that's coming up around that feels really familiar. Like I've got to go through and process it, regain my power. But it's not the first time I've done this.
Yeah. The way I look at it is, you have so many different facets to each belief that you took on, and we have core beliefs. So if you have a core belief, I think of it as this big metal rock, and you have all these paper clips attached to it. So you'll have a situation come up, and you're going through it, you're processing, and you're releasing. And so you take one of those paper clips off. well, then you get to a point over time, and it may take years, where you'll get to the core belief. But what's so wonderful is when you have lots of paper clips, you may stay in emotional angst a vast majority of the time. You may be stressed out. And then as you take a paper clip off, it gets a little better, right? And then the more and more, then the time between those moments when you're feeling really triggered and in emotional angst start dissipating. I mean, I can remember it seemed like I lived in emotional chaos all the time. I was always judging myself, judging others. I had this running belief that I was bad, that I was moody, I was difficult. I mean, that was my running belief. And so if you are holding any kind of belief like that, you're going to constantly be questioning yourself as to how to do things, because you're always looking for other people to say you're okay, that you're lovable, that you're likable, right?
Mhm.
And so for me, that drove me nuts, because everything in my life I was questioning. I mean, I was questioning, are my parents going to love me? Or, and then as I became an adult, and my spouse and my kids, I mean, it was always chaos. I mean, that's a big one for parents, is if you have kids, is we work so hard for our children. And yes, we want them to have success. We want them to have happiness. But when we deny ourselves, what we're really saying is, I want my child to fill me up. I want you to fill me up. And what pressure
Yeah.
that
The little
is.
kid, right? They
Yeah.
don't have the brain to process and deal with all that stuff.
No, they don't. And it's so tough. And I'll never forget, my mother had a stroke. Oh, it's been 20 years ago. She was in her 50s. And I do energy work. So I was doing some energy work on her. When she left the room, I heard in my ear, "You're not to blame for your mother's pain."
Mm-hmm.
And I went, "What?" And I heard it again. I mean, it was my voice, but it was so strong. "You're not to blame for your mother's pain." And I went, oh my gosh, I have been carrying this my whole lifetime, because mom suppressed herself, right? She denied herself. So when you're in that self-denial, you disconnect from who you are. You disconnect from joy. You disconnect from love and peacefulness and playfulness. And you're in that state of pain. Well, she didn't know. She didn't have any tools. And so her pain in those moments would come out at us. And I was the oldest. So I took it on as, I'm the problem. I'm the one who's causing your pain and suffering. And that really hit
Probably
home.
subconsciously too, though. I mean, it wasn't like you're like
No,
saying it out loud,
no,
but that
no.
was the message that your brain at the time, right, was saying,
Yes,
based on the feelings and the emotions and the worry, the doubt, all the stuff that's coming up in your
right.
mother's life.
Right, because when a parent is lashing out at their child, not necessarily because they're mad at the child, but just maybe they're at their wits' end, and we all have done it, right? I mean, how many of us that can say we have not done that? And I mean, I know I have. That's why I got on my spiritual journey, because I did it too much, and I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to be that for my kids. I wanted to set a different example, and so what with the kids, all their little brains are thinking is, she's mad at me. She's mad at me. And this is scary. And so what I found for myself is, I had this tremendous fear of being attacked, of having somebody throw that energy at me. And it has even hindered me over the years from putting myself out in the world. Like Nicole, you were talking about, you had opportunities coming. You were concerned about your husband having issue. Mine was, if I put myself out there, somebody's going to attack me. Somebody's going to, come at me with really heavy energy and scary energy. And my little inner child's going, no, don't do this to me. Have any of you ever felt that way?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone at home's like,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I remember when I was a kid, just thinking of that, not feeling safe, right? If I show up fully as myself, I'm not safe in that. As a kid, you're trying to discover and develop and grow. My mom would make it conditional. Like,
Yes.
you are worthy if. You were worthy if. There was a time about 2 a.m, she woke up and emptied all the cabinets. Just popped all the pots and pans, woke us from a deep sleep, made us put it all back, right? Clean up the kitchen at 2 a.m. We got school the next day. You look at that and then you base your worthiness off of that. Well, if I please mom, not only can I go back to bed, but she'll be happy.
Yes.
That's traumatic, right? Now I can hold on to that story and say I can't grow because of that. But the truth is that that's not fair to me, because my worth isn't dependent on what she did. She chose to do that thing, but that has nothing to do with my worth.
Right. But what happens is that we carry that into our subconscious minds and we don't even know that's there. So we get programmed from very early on, as you said, to please mom, right? So then that starts going to our teachers and to our friends, to our bosses. It keeps going until we become conscious of it and say, wait, you don't determine my worth. I determine my worth. But you've got to be willing to go within and do the inner work. You've got to go into that subconscious mind. And to me, the best way is by doing the retrieving the gift of love process, like I was talking about earlier. And you'd said, Nick, do you do this over? I literally, if I get triggered in any way that makes me angry, sad, depressed, whatever those lower level emotions are, I look at them as gifts and I'm like, thank you. I'm out of alignment, because I know that if I'm joyful and in a wonderful space, then I'm in alignment with the way I was created. I'm saying yes to me. I'm being the authority of my life. But if I'm in some kind of negative space, then I know that there is something inside my subconscious mind that is yearning to be released, that is yearning to say, I don't belong here. This is not who this person is. Let's get rid of it. And, and I do it through love. I'm like, okay, what are you trying to teach me? What is the gift here? What is the belief that I'm carrying? And what's so interesting about this is that as I've done this on a regular basis and really claimed my crown, saying, yes, I am worthy of this kind of nurturing. I mean, but I spend 2 hours a day in meditation and journaling. Okay. Because I feel like that's where my peace comes from. I'm in a connection. I'm in a connection to God and to the universe, to my guides, and I'm in connection to myself, right? Because we want that connection. And so when I start my day in that state of a connection, then everything else around me, it doesn't matter. I can be in a state of neutrality and not get caught up in your stuff. And I'll give you an example of this. When my late husband died, my youngest was in the 8th grade. And my husband died of a heart attack. And my youngest is a lot like I am. We both express our pain through anger. Okay. Some people crawl under the sheets. We get like this, right? It's like, yeah. Well, she was doing that. And my older daughter looked at her one day and she said, oh my gosh, Colby, you're just so angry all the time. Well, and Colby was this little bitty thing and her little lip started quivering. She goes, I hate my life. And I said, baby, I am so sorry. You're hurting. I am so sorry that you're in pain. And she runs to the bedroom door. She shuts the door, slams it. And I went over there and I knocked on the door and I said, please let me love you. Please let me love you. And she opened the door and she collapsed into my arms. Well, years later, she said that was the turning point for her, because I didn't judge her pain. I didn't judge her anger. And what I know for sure is that if I hadn't cleaned up my own judgment on my anger, because I was told you're too angry, suppress it, you got to push it down, my anger became my gift to see where I was hurting inside and where I wasn't loving myself. And so by embracing it, I started to heal it. Right? I started to love it. I looking at little Terri and saying, what's hurting? Why are you angry? What's going on? What happened? And by doing that, then I could look at my daughter and respond, not in a state of, you need to control your anger, but in a state of, I love you. Let me love you. And she said that was the turning point for her, because she knew I wasn't judging her. And it's helped her to start shifting her mindset on how she was looking at herself. So this is why it's so important that we parents do this inner work, right? So that we don't project our lack onto our children, but instead can hold that space for them to walk their path. Have you ever had that happen or anything like that with one of your kids? Any of you?
Well, I'm thinking before we go down that road too, the developmental stage of kids from age 0 to 25, most of their neurons are developed right after birth. And then from there to 25, they're developing their brain. So as a parent, whatever that parent is teaching them is going to be their prefrontal cortex. That's going to be where they think from. And so if the parent hasn't done their work, that child can't help but take on what the parent is teaching them.
Exactly.
Here's something interesting inside of that too, because a lot of times we think of like trauma events, like major trauma events, or yelling or screaming or abuse, or all kinds of things are making you feel like you're not worthy. I had kind of the opposite. Like I was loved to death. Like my parents are fantastic parents, but my dad was starting his business. He was, I'm back in the 80s. I was born in 1981, and I was good at sports. Sports wasn't life, but my dad loved sports because it was something he related to, and he just loved to connect with me in that way. Well, he was so proud of me. He would tell people like stories of like of I stole home base one time. I was on third, stole home base. We won the championship. Like it was this big to do, cloud of smoke or dust, and it clears, and the umpire's like safe, safe, safe. So crowd goes wild, right? Well, he would tell everybody about these stories, and he's an accountant, so people would come into his office. They'd see pictures of his family, and he'd start talking about his family. Well, I started to learn that, hey, well, my dad, when I do something positive or amazing, that's when he talks about like how much he loves me. Now he wasn't consciously like saying, like trying not to talk about me because he didn't love me. He was trying to talk about me because he did love me.
Right.
But in my little brain started saying, well, my dad's love is tied to me performing in a certain way, so that then he'll praise me. Right? My dad's a great guy. He's not a bad person. In fact, his name is Guy. He's a great guy. He's the best. I got to go fishing with him the other day and connect with him and love him. But that was what little Ryan saw. So he created this operating system that if I'm to be loved by my dad, I need to be successful in sports, in relationships, in business. I've got to have the things that he has and the successes that he has that he's worked his whole life for. And somehow, like, I've got to perform so that he'll think I'm amazing, have the same amount of kids or more, have the same cars in the house. And so I did that.
I can totally relate to that.
It's crazy. Like my dad's love wasn't tied to any of that. In fact, I told him about it, like what I was feeling, which was hard to do. Like, this is what it was, Dad. And he was like, no offense, but that's crazy because I love you no matter what you do. And it was like, well, gosh dang it. Like it was
Isn't it crazy what our brains do?
Yeah, like, wow. Huh. And it took like Nicole. I had some coaching with Nicole. And talking to her about my operating systems. I had multiple operating systems, and they were useful to a point, and then as I became an adult, they became not useful.
Right.
And as circumstances changed and stuff like that in my life. So I just think that's interesting that sometimes people, like I watch these episodes, or we interview people and we talk about like the trauma and things like that, and not discounting that at all, because that is a big thing, and that's something that needs to be worked on and looked at.
Yeah.
But sometimes it could be the exact opposite, because our brains aren't developed. Our brains create these operating systems that for a while they might be useful, but then they're not. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Absolutely. It's so interesting. I used to have what I would call anxiety. And even though it was never diagnosed, but I would walk into a grocery store, I'd walk into the bank. This is as an adult, after Miss USA and after being a news anchor, which I never felt this way really, but it was in my daily life. And I would just feel like this energy was racing through my body. It was so uncomfortable. And so because I always nurture that little kid inside of me, I finally one day heard in my ear, embrace this, see it as a gift, because I kept resisting it. And when we resist, persists, right? So I said, okay, thank you for the gift. Whatever this is, thank you for the gift. Well, I walk into an office superstore one morning and I start feeling it again. Because I have this amazing relationship with the little girl inside of me, the little 5-year-old, I leaned over my shopping cart as if she were standing right there. And I said, what's hurting? What is causing you to react this way? And in my mind's eye, right through here, I see her standing there and she says, when I go out into public, I have to act perfectly or I get into big trouble. Okay.
How many of us have done that? Like to our kids, right at the grocery store,
Oh,
you're
I
like, "Get over
know.
here! Don't touch that! No, we're not
I
buying that."
know. I know, but I really took it in, okay? And because it was making me go like this. I mean, I was like, what's going on with me? And I mean, this went on for like 2 years. And then when I heard embrace it, see it as a gift, it took about 2 months for it to really show up. Well, in that moment, I said to little Terri, I said, I'm the boss now. And you can do cartwheels down this aisle if you need to do that. I didn't need to do cartwheels, but you know what, you guys? It went away just like that. It never came back.
Can I ask you on that, like on the resistance, why does that keep it around? Why do you think it keeps it around?
Because what's that old saying, whatever you resist persists? Because to me, it's a gift. It's a feeling that's happening and it's being triggered by a belief in your subconscious mind. So until you clean up that belief, it's going to persist. You're going to keep getting triggered. And so this is why it's so important that we look at our triggers, that we look at what's going on in my outer world and how is it affecting me, and really paying attention to our feelings, right? I mean, we're so programmed in our society to not feel, but our feelings are God's guideposts. Our feelings are our soul talking to us saying, hello. You can look at it from a spiritual perspective or a science perspective. The science is you're being triggered, right? You've got a charge here. So for me, it's like we as kids, I mean, you said it so beautifully, Ryan. I mean, here your parents are trying to do the best thing possible. I mean, your dad's loving you and your little mind says, oh, you made a decision as a kid that I have to perform for my dad. I did the same thing. I was my dad's son. I was the one who was out shooting guns with him. We go to the boat. I'm the one on the lake. I'm the one pulling it up on the trailer. I mean, I'm doing all the son stuff. Okay. And so for me, it was the same exact thing because as I said, daddy was having more fun. So I was going to be like dad. I was also raised in the 60s and the 70s during the women's movement. So even though you're not seeing a lot of it in Cabot, Arkansas, where I was raised, my dad would say, you can be anything you want to be, which was awesome. Right. So I just wanted to please him. And I'll tell you, do we need to go to break? Are we getting close to break? Because I was going to tell you.
We got about 2 minutes.
Okay. I'll tell you this quick story.
Yep.
So my dad died in 95 and his death really is what woke me up and said, I need to shift because he died a broken man. He lost everything in bankruptcy. And I realized he had no forgiveness of himself. So, he couldn't receive love. I mean, it was really sad. So years later, I'm doing my meditation all the time and I'm doing all this healing work. And my girlfriend said to me, she's an intuitive. She said, your dad's really wanting to talk to you. And I said, oh, I've been feeling his presence, but I didn't even think about talking to him. I just thought he was hanging out. And so I said, okay. Well, I sat down in meditation and all of a sudden I hear this park. And this is when I was living in Los Angeles and it was this Girl Scout park called Wilderness Park. So it felt like you were out in the woods. Mm-hmm. because I hear go. So I get in my car and I drive down there and I'm sitting by this little stream and there's rabbits. I mean, there's everything. And I felt his presence. I said, Dad, what's going on? I said, why did you need me to be so perfect? Because that's what was coming up. And I do a lot of automatic writing with my less dominant hand because it gives you a channel. And so I was sitting there writing and he said, I didn't ever want you to be perfect. He said, you inspired me to be more like you. And you guys, I mean, it literally took my breath away because I had these preconceived notions that I had to perform for Dad. And really what it was my mom, because she was so brought up that the man is God in the home and that the man has the final say, that she would really instill in us to be perfect. But it wasn't Dad that was expecting it of us. It was my mom's expectations. But because it was always, well, your dad, that, and this is what I saw exemplified in our home, is that Dad, he was the one that mattered when it came to whose opinion mattered more. And so when I learned that from him in that moment, it was life-changing. And it was because I took on that belief as a little kid. And my whole life I had been performing, because that's where I got so much approval, was from my dad.
Man, that's awesome. Let's go ahead and go to commercial break. And then when we come back, we'll continue this. And so we'll pause for just a bit here. We'll give it the, this pause is where they'll plug that in, but we've got about 2 minutes to just chat here. When we pick back up, can we continue with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about like those moments. Like there are those moments where it shifts. Like there's like this aha almost moment. You know, and I had it with Nicole, where 39 years of my life, and you know, you know, I feel like I'm old enough to like recognize these things and you know, be an adult. But then she comes in and says a few things to me, asks me a couple other questions about how I'm operating and what my being is. And it was like, holy crap, that's how I've been operating my whole life. Like, and then I want to talk about gratitude for little Terri and little Ryan. Like that was beautiful. Like the grocery store experience.
I tell you, I have those experiences all the time. Just with the little Terri, I can go real dark. I'm a Scorpio through and through. Okay. I mean, my brain.
You're in a good crowd.
Woo! Are y'all Scorpios too?
No, but there's a lot of dark moments and weird stuff that comes up.
Oh my gosh. And I'm just, I'm like, whoa. And so for me, this has been life-saving. It has changed everything. And we can talk about that more when we go on air, but it's been so life-changing, because as I have nurtured that little girl, I do feel seen. I do feel like as if I matter. I do feel as if I'm being heard, because I'm hearing her. And then I take a stand for whatever she needs. I take action. I do whatever she needs to feel loved. And in that state, that's where I feel worthy. And it has changed
10
everything.
seconds.
Okay.
Oh,
Yep.
okay, that's it.
Yeah. 8 seconds, 5 seconds. Welcome back to Wake Up with Giants Radio. I'm Nick Smith, joined in studio today by Ryan the Lion Morris, Nicole Castillo, Cola de RPG, and Terri Britt, former Miss USA. And we're talking about claiming your crown and your worth. And so let's pick up where we left off. That was a beautiful share that you had just before the break, Terri.
Yes. Go ahead. What were you going to say, Ryan?
I was just going to say, yeah, we talked kind of in between the breaks, so I want to come back into that about your inner child and giving gratitude for your inner child, things like that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that experience with my dad, when I felt him in spirit with me, and then in writing with my other hand, I always use my less dominant hand because it takes you into your intuitive mind. And so it's a great way to have a channel of information coming in, whether you want to talk to God, Christ, whatever, your dad, your mom, whoever, it doesn't matter. It's just, you can talk to that, or you can even talk to your inner child that way. So I use it a lot. But when Daddy came through and said, I didn't need you to be perfect, I wanted to be more like you, it really did change my life, because I had lived by this standard that I needed to be perfect to be loved. I needed to do everything right. When you realize that what you were talking about earlier about the operation that you live by, how you operated, that was how I operated. I operated, one, to keep away from having people attack me, and then operated to be perfect. So one, to avoid the attack, but to also be loved and to feel nurtured. And the interesting thing was, though, is I never really felt loved. I never felt nurtured. I mean, you think in winning Miss USA in that moment, I'm thinking, this is it. This is it. Because you think, oh, you've just been loved by all these judges. You just won this big title. Nope, didn't fill me up. So for me, it was really about taking that little kid inside of me in my arms and loving her so much and being so grateful, giving her permission to speak to me, to be heard, really breaking all those little good girl rules that I had taken on as a child, and saying, no, your voice matters to me. Your voice matters. I love you. And I mean, sometimes I can just hug her so much in my heart that it'll bring me to tears. of joy, right? And what's so cool about it is I call it my own little holy trinity. It's my inner child and me, because we make that connection. And then I open up to connect to this all-loving energy of God and the universe. And so whatever she's needing, I do for her. I clean up the beliefs. I love her. And then I go to my counsel. I go to my guides and say, okay, this is where I am. And can you give me some guidance? Can you tell me some next steps to take? Or, just can you be here with me as I work through this? And when you have that kind of connection, I don't know if you guys have that experience, and I would love for you to share if you do. But when you have that kind of connection, it doesn't matter what the rest of the world thinks. And that is what has been so freeing for me and has brought so much peace to me, because I am doing this inner work and I'm loving myself and I'm finding peace through that as I stand in my truth. But knowing that as I stand in my truth, that I am supported and nurtured beyond anything that I ever imagined in my life, it's been transformational in ways that I can't even say. And it also changed my family. It changed everything for my family. And that was the biggest thing, because then I saw myself, not only am I loving myself this way and taking the time to nurture myself, which again, going to that old family paradigm is don't take care of yourself, take care of everyone else at the expense of yourself. I stopped the cycle of pain and suffering and said, no, I'm going to be this example for my family. I became a woman leader of love, is what the divine download I got was, woman leader of love. And what a gift, to see this with my kids, to see them thriving in their relationships. And they're going to have their stuff. We all have our stuff. But to see them, it's so funny because my youngest, she calls and vents a lot, or she used to more, but she's in a really good relationship that she can do it with him. But inevitably she'd call and vent, and I'd say, well, what's the gift? And there have been several times, Mom, can I just vent a few minutes before we start talking about the gift?
Before we fix it all.
So
that feeling though, you talked about, like the weight, when you don't have to worry about the judgments of others or how, just you're worthy, you matter, you're perfect. Like that inner, doing that work, there was a shift. People saw it in my eyes.
Yeah.
So I would post pictures of, on my profile, and people were like, what's wrong? Why, something's going on. You're sad. There's a disconnect. You're lonely. You're fearful, all these things. And then as I started doing that work, they'll still comment on it, like, wow, look at, I can see, like, it's like the window to your soul is your eyes. And it was true. And they don't know everything that was going on. And they don't know the things that I was working on. They just saw the difference, a physical difference, something, an aura, a different aura about me.
So
but I'll tell you, that feeling, it was like a whole yoke, or this whole huge amount of weight just put it off, like got it off, and I could show up different.
Yeah.
It could change everything.
But did you find, I know for me, what happened is I literally used to feel like I had a wall around me because I was protecting myself, right? And I remember one day imagining there was a button and I had the choice to take down the wall or I could leave it up. And I just visually started imagining that it was coming down. As I continued to do that and as I continued to love myself, I really noticed the difference in my heart chakra. I don't know if you're familiar with chakras, but when, these are energy portals. And so your heart chakra is, where you will love yourself, for those who are watching who don't know. And I could feel myself when I was in that defense protective mode, everything shut down. It was like in this state of contraction and my heart would feel tight. And it was almost like when you see somebody sitting like this. But when I started loving myself, it was as everything opened up and there was more love to give. And people felt it. They could see it. People, I have people say that to me all the time. Like, I just wanted to talk to you for a minute, and it already felt better. Because when you're exuding that love for someone, even, I mean, we have a coffee company. These are people that come and drink coffee, but they can feel it. And it's such an immense gift, right? It's like when you love yourself like that and you take that weight off, like you're talking about, and your heart expands open, people, they feel it. They want to get near it. I was at a birthday party last night, and this woman, it was at a local tavern, and this woman I don't know came up and she grabbed my hand.
Sounds like our kind of party too.
Oh, it was. And let me tell you, I'm feeling a little of it today. If my voice sounds a little husky, that's why. It was really, really fun. But this woman at the beginning, because it was open. It was not just the party that was there. It was that we took over a corner, but this woman comes up and she grabs me and she says, "You're inspiring me. I follow you." And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And I said, "Are you local?" But within minutes, she's in tears. And because she feels the love. And it's like, if you can give that to people, if you can give and help them see that they're worthy of being loved, then us doing the work to own our worth and to claim our crowns is by far our greatest act of service. And especially as parents, as children of parents, as friends and siblings, it is absolutely our greatest act of service to take that time to really do the inner work. And if I could give everybody a little kick in the rump and say, come on, because we look at what's going on in the world, right? Where there's so much lack, there's so much dissension because people are in pain, they're suffering inside, and they want to blame everyone else. But it's because they're not in a state of really owning their worth and claiming their crown. Because if they were, they would look at all of this and go, oh, there's a big spiritual awakening happening. Everybody's going to have to learn to love themselves.
You talk about, like claiming your crown and your, your power and things like that. One of my operating systems, has been, I was taught, work hard, like you show the rest. Like, I swear, I've said this before, and some of our viewers know this, but I swear my dad had me convinced that Labor Day was a day to show the rest of the world how hard you could work. Like,
yes.
I'm watching everyone else like pull out with their boats and go camping and stuff like that. There we are pulling weeds in the, in the backyard or whatever. And, but he taught me a strong work ethic, which was good.
Right.
But I had a paper route at 7 years old, and not just one, two. And like I became like a door-to-door collection agency. I would go around and collecting the money.
Wow.
Back then, they didn't have like PayPal or Venmo or automatic bill pay. That was me. I was their automatic bill pay, knocking on their door, collecting my dollar, for their paper. But going through that stuff, I became, I adopted that, and I became some sort of a workaholic. And that I had to prove like how hard I could work and I could outwork anybody. That was my thing. I could say I'll outwork anybody.
Oh yeah.
Nobody can outwork me.
How's that work for you?
That doesn't work. I'm telling you. You think it works, but I'm telling you, it ruins relationships. It stresses out marriages. Your kids notice it. You miss out on all these things in life. You miss life trying to live life to the fullest of hard work. Nicole taught me this stuff too. She talks about I'm going to call on you, Nicole, so get ready. She talks about taking time, those like boundaries, and then taking time for yourself. And Nicole, will you talk about that a little bit? Because you're a pretty good expert on this. And she's always like, every time I talk about, okay, I took some time for myself. Like I went fishing and I cleared my table, cleared my plate, and said, I'm going. And there's nothing that I have to do, nowhere I have to be today. Nobody needs my time more than me. It's my time, and I get to choose how this looks today. And I chose to be with my dad and just enjoy it. No stress about worrying about what time to come home, all this stuff, right? Nicole, talk about this stuff and like what's the benefits from all of that?
Well, it makes you more productive. When
you're always telling me what, like when Ryan takes time for himself and fills up his cup, then what happens?
You take care of the rest of us, because we are a version of Ryan. We are not getting the overworked, stressed out version of Ryan. So Ryan shows up more powerfully in the world when he takes time for himself. So it's not just serving you, it's also serving your wife, your children, your league members, your fellow league members, our tribe, everyone. I think if everyone could just focus on like healing one person and having that person be themselves, it would show up. Like Terri was saying, the whole world would shift if everyone just focused on their own care, their own healing. And it just provides a space for other people to heal, for people to have that permission. Ryan's going camping and he's going with all these powerful people and he's going to be cooking for all these people. Okay, for a week. Well, you need to
She got mad at me. She got mad at me because I have been in the past the guy that like I'll do anything for anybody. Like I had no boundaries, and so I was gonna go camping, but then I was gonna do everything for everybody. And Nicole was like, Ryan,
I'm like,
don't do that.
You need to schedule time to just go be Ryan for an hour a day or an hour during, like, just go and be, and have that time for yourself. Because when you're saying yes to things, like when you're so worried about what other people will think and they come to you and they ask you like, hey, I need help moving. And Ryan's like, okay, well, I've got the trailer and like what day of the week, well, it's this day of the week. Okay, well, I have this going on, but he doesn't say no. Okay, I'm really talking about myself because I'm that person that's like, oh, I have this planned with my kids. Okay, guys, but this person needs help moving. So we will have to schedule time another time because I'm more concerned about what other people think about me than scheduling time like with my own kids. So I've had to work through that, right? Being able to say level.
Yeah. So speaking of that accepting of yourself, right? Because you're out there looking for that approval from other people, and it really starts in here. And so that acceptance of yourself is where I think a lot of us struggle, is we're not willing to accept ourselves the way that we are. It has nothing to do with anybody out there. It's our judgments of ourselves that do that. JP Morgan, I think, talked about the distinction within acceptance of allowance and accommodation. Allowance is granting, right? You grant space for that thing to occur. And accommodation is you let it live there. You're accommodating it. And so the distinction within acceptance is that you can allow for it to be there, but there are some things that you don't want to accommodate. They don't belong in your space anymore. So you want to move them out. And so part of that, just looking at loving ourselves is really coming back to, look, there's space for you to be who you are. And we're going to also grow into a new way of being. Like you talk about, Terri, I'm in charge now and we get to do cartwheels. So I'm no longer going to accommodate that old rule.
So fun.
Yeah.
I'm going to the grocery store with Terri.
Yeah.
Well, another part of this too is when you look at the energy of it all, because we now know we're all energy, right? Quantum physics says we are all energy. When you are doing what you think you should be doing,
you just spoke Nick's language. That's his love language.
Yeah, and when you are doing the doing, okay, because you think you have to be doing it because you're seeking love and approval, what you're energetically sending out is a message that who I am is not enough. And because you're emitting that vibration, then you are going to attract things into your life that feel hard, that feel like a struggle. So now you work that much harder going, when am I ever going to get it right? When am I ever going to break through my glass ceilings? When is my husband ever going to hear me? All those things. And the more you perform, the more you're going to stay on that hamster wheel. And I call this my low worthiness quotient column. And then to get to the high worthiness quotient column is when you love yourself and you align with the way you were created. To me, that's putting God first. Because I'm like, how can I honor and love God today by honoring and loving the way I was created? And when I do that and I align, I'm now feeling worthy. I've owned my crown. I've claimed it. I'm at a high vibration. And now I attract things to me that feel loving and kind and get my life into a divine flow. Well, what better example do we want to give our families than that? Right? You're talking about, being a workaholic. My husband has a tendency. He was just like you. First grade, he was mowing lawns. He's 68 years old, and he's always been an entrepreneur. Since he was a little kid, he was an entrepreneur. I mean, just anything he could do to make money, and that's what he did. Well, we have our first coffee company that we bought up here in the mountains. just a little store. And he had always had this vision of having a destination place where people could have an experience. Well, there you can have an experience in 700 square feet, and that was about it because it's a historical building.
Mhm.
So he was also going after wholesale business a lot, and he was always on the road, which is what his old way of being was in sales was. Well, I had him listen one day to an audio on poverty consciousness versus prosperity consciousness. Poverty consciousness meaning you're at that low worthiness quotient, you're driving yourself into the ground, you're working yourself to death, right? And he had wholesale business coming in, but it was always hard. Well, he listened to this audio and he says, I'm in poverty consciousness. And I said, really, why? And he told me, he says, I'm going after all this wholesale business. He goes, I want wholesale business, but I don't want to be on the road. I want to be home with you and the dogs. You know, we live in this mountain retreat and it's, you know, so I don't want to be on the road. So because he understands the power of loving himself unconditionally and choosing prosperity consciousness, especially in that moment he got it, he stopped going after wholesale business. He just went cold turkey. And the key is he didn't feel guilty about it. Okay. He just was like, I got to stop. I got to love myself. Well, let me tell you, wholesale business started flooding in. I mean, because he was, isn't it interesting? And then here's what's really interesting. He created a space now in his life for something that he loved, right? Because he was moving something else out. It was about 2 or 3 months later that a 7-acre parcel, 5 minutes from our home, came up for sale that already had a building on it, has the most majestic view of this amazing mountain called Mount Yonah, and cow pastures behind it. So there's no homes. It's just all rolling land. We ended up getting the building. And we created, it's a tasting room and coffee house. It's called Jumping Goat Coffee Roasters and Tasting Room. And our business is up since last year. We opened this 3 years ago, is up since last year, 67%. And it's because he is doing what he loves. He made space. Our wholesale business is flying. Our internet business is flying. I mean, and it's because he's holding that space. Now, he still has a tendency to be a workaholic. And he realizes that. And so I have to reel him in, you know, and trust that. And it really comes down to trust, I think, that if you're being in that workaholic mode, you're not trusting that everything is going to be okay.
Trying to control it, right?
Yes. You're not allowing yourself to receive the love, right? The love is there. It's always there if we allow ourselves to receive it. But when we're working ourselves to death, we're not in it. We don't get into a receptive state. So it's really important to be in a receptive state. And you do that by creating the boundaries that Nicole was talking about, by loving yourself. But you have to get into this mindset that I can be really successful without killing myself. I can love myself and have a balance. Okay. And I have to tell you, for years, I pulled away when I started realizing that I had, because I was that person that always drove myself into the ground. I mean, straight A student and, you know, trying to be the best mom. Everything was got to be the best, because I thought that's what was going to win me love. And when I started recognizing that, no, I win love when I love myself. And in that vibrational state, then love comes in because I let it in. And that's what we have to understand, whether love is coming in as an act of love through a person you love or through business flooding in, money coming in. It's being in that state of love so that you are open now to receive. So you always want to get into that receptive state, and that's through loving yourself and whatever that looks like.
Can you create a distinction for me here between knowing and being? Like, I might know something, what you're talking about. I might know this. Fundamentally, I know all the information. I can rattle it off and tell you the bullet points and everything.
Right.
And then being that is a different thing.
Absolutely.
And I feel like, yeah, go ahead.
If she's got something, Nick.
Yeah.
Well, to me, the knowing is like reading a book. Like, oh, I get all this, right? But are you walking your talk? Are you living in it? So for me, I can talk it all day, but I know that I can't fully be it until I've integrated, I've practiced. It's almost like, you know, practice and practice and practice. And then as you practice loving yourself, as you practice retrieving the gift of love and everything you see and everything you're reacting to, that as you practice, it becomes a state of being. It's just like, when you're a kid and you first start playing baseball, you're probably not a great player, right? But you practice and practice, and then all of a sudden it's like people may say you're going to be a great baseball player, and you may have a knowingness like, yeah, I can do this. But until you practice it and you are actually embodying it, do you be it? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So here's another
You
part
testing me here?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I got you. No, I'm not testing you at all. I love this.
You come on, bring it
I'm
on.
leading you on. Yeah. No, the distinction or the difference between knowing and being, right? The integrity is just simply the difference or the space between what you know and who you be in the world, and that shows up in your doing. And so integrity isn't a shameful thing. If you're saying that you know something and you're not being it, it's not that you're shameful. It's just there's an opportunity to close the gap and start to align what you know with who you be in the world. And this is where I think a lot of us get hung up, is we shame ourselves or we feel guilty for that gap. Like, oh, I know this, I know better. And then we be something different. And then we shame ourselves and we kill ourselves over that gap.
Absolutely. And I think that's where compassion comes in. And that was a big one for me to have to learn, because I could have compassion for other people, but I didn't have it for myself. So, and unless they were triggering me, if they were triggering me, I might not have compassion, but then I'd come back around and go, okay, they're playing their part. I'm learning about myself. But then again, I would, still not have that kind of compassion that I needed. It was when I started saying, where you are right now is okay. It's okay. And what was so interesting is that the more compassion I would have and be in that state of where I am right now is okay, because I was getting rid of the perfect pictures, right? When you're being hard on yourself, you have a perfect picture.
Right.
And so I was letting go of those perfect pictures and just saying where I am right now is okay. And just by having more compassion, did I move into alignment with a little more grace and ease.
I love that. Guys, we're wrapping up. We're about 2 minutes out. So I kind of want to go around the room and just ask your final thoughts. I'm going to ask for Nicole's. I'll get my words here eventually. Nicole, do you want to share just some final thoughts real quick?
Yeah. I know that we've talked about seeing ourselves like as a child, our inner child, whose intention is always to keep us safe and protected. But also it can support sometimes to see other people in moments as the inner child. So using my husband as an example, sometimes I'll see him as an 8-year-old little boy hiding scared under a bed. And that helps me shift from a place of judgment to a place of compassion when dealing with other people. So that was
I love that.
I love that. Yeah, thank you.
Viewers too, to know that they're worthy, that they're enough, that they're loved, and that like to look at when you become aware of how you're being, or your belief system that has maybe been an operating system that you've lived on for X amount of years, that it's okay. It's not necessarily that it was bad. It just now might not work, for you. And so as you become conscious and aware of that, find out what's true. Go back to the truths that you are worthy, that you are loved, that you are beautiful, that you're amazing. And as you start doing that inner child work, that you can start to own your crown and just grow and rise and become a giant.
Perfect. Terri, I'll let you finish us out here. About 1 minute or less.
What about you? What are you going to say?
Well, same thing. I just want to wrap up with it all, is that it really is our personal judgment of ourselves and how we judge others judging us that matters most. Is we are the definer of our experience. And so just giving grace to that, compassion to that is beautiful.
I love it. And for me, I would just say that, you are worthy and you deserve love and nurturing and support. And if you ever question that, that's because you're holding on to a false belief that is not the truth. You took that on as a little kid. So I just want to encourage you to commit to healing, commit to unconditional love today, that no more performing, no more trying to get it right, but honoring and loving the way you were created, because it is absolutely your greatest act of service.
That was beautiful. Beautiful show, guys. Thanks for joining us. Make sure if you haven't subscribed yet to do that. Catch us on Cat Country. We'll put the information into the video when we post that. But appreciate you each week, and join us next week for another great guest, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you.
Love you too.
Love you guys.
Bye, guys.